We'd like to begin today, share a song that Richard and Joan heard as they were sitting together in the fifth row of a live concert right here in Columbus many, many years ago. This is a song by Linda Ronstadt and Aaron Neville singing "Don't Know Much." Beautiful words and melody. Good morning, and thank you for attending this celebration of life of Joan Evelyn Needles. She was born Joan Schuster on January 16th, 1945, and passed away on December 19th of last year. My name is John Reed, and Richard asked me to officiate this celebration and say a few words about Joan. My wife, Leanne, and I have known Richard and Joan for over 30 years now. We've treasured their friendship, shared meals together, attended theater outings, and on many occasions simply sat around and enjoyed each other's company. I think you'll all agree Joan was easy to like and easy to love. A bit shy, she fell into the quiet observer category. You knew I had to use some of Richard's lingo, right? Then when you'd least expect it, she'd come out with a comment that made us all kind of sit up and take notice. Joan once told a friend that the secret to the long marriage to Richard was, "I think I calm him down, and he brings me out of my shell." I couldn't agree more with that assessment. When I think of Joan and Richard together, please allow me an analogy, if you will. The Needles steamship line. Richard may have been the captain of the ship and set out sail into the world, but Joan, she was the harbor master. She provided the safe haven to which he returned after each and every trip. For me, their relationship was a perfect match of going out and coming home. At this time, I'd like to ask Miss Ilse Mann, one of Joan's childhood friends since the first grade, to come forward and share a few thoughts about Joan.
I think I first met Joan in line at West School in Delaware when we were getting our vaccinations for smallpox, and they had tables. And at that time, in 1951, Delaware had 4 elementary schools: north, south, east, and west. And you were where you lived. You went to that school, and so we were in West School because we lived just a couple of blocks away from each other. And in the school, they had a big open room on each floor, and they had long tables, and they're giving shots and vaccinations to little kids, you know. And I believe that I just have a very faint memory of meeting Joan and her mother there. Also, in the school, there were only 2 classes of each grade level, so we were always there. One thing we also had back then were 2 recesses, one in the morning, one in the afternoon, to go outside and play, and also an hour for lunch. So we walked home and back and forth for lunch. And Joan wore 2 outfits a week, and beautiful ones, by the way. And she would come home go to school after Wednesday lunch with a different outfit on. And one Monday, Tuesday, and half of Wednesday, then the other one, And anyhow, we became, very close friends, two very shy little girls. And so in third grade, that was when we really bonded and were absolutely, kind of inseparable, because we had the same spirit and essence and shyness. And we played at each other's houses. My family had no rules. Her family, you had to be in by the time the street lights went on. And so we played in the Delaware Run, which was close, in a little stream close to her house. And the Armory yard there. My house was a rented one at the university where my father taught, and we were in Stuyvesant, which has since been a lot of it taken down and buildings built. But it used to be a wonderful ravine, and every time it snowed, we would, sled there and play, and then we ended up taking dance lessons together over at Sanborn Hall where my father taught, and my parents didn't believe in the standard dance studio, so they found a teacher who taught just sort of Joan and me, and maybe another child. And so we would go over to walk to Sanborn Hall and go down through the ravine, down these really steep steps over to Sanborn Hall, and then after we had our ballet slippers, and we would go to the top floor and then drop them down the hallway and giggle and carry on and so forth. We danced in Brigadoon in the sixth grade. We had the May Day celebrations. I remember when we did the Pied Piper, and the little girls were the villagers and the little boys were the rats. And I mean, we had, it was fun. We had a lot of just being there. I remember in fifth grade when I went to sit down, and Joan was behind me, and she pulled the chair out, and I went on the floor, and of course the kids all howled, and the teacher blamed me. Like, I could have gotten her, right? But we had matching dolls, matching Ginny dolls. Her mother made these beautiful, like this little gingham blue and white outfit. Mine had one just like it with little lace things. And we had matching purses. We had a wonderful time. And Joan's family was quite provincial and just staying in Delaware County pretty much. And my family was doing whatever traveling they could, especially to New York and to Cincinnati, where I had my great aunts in the house of my great grandparents. And so one weekend we took Joan with us, which was a big outing, and we stayed in the room together, giggling half the night, chewing a lot of gum, and put it on the walnut, or I think it's mahogany bed, stuck all this gum on there, you do things. But we had so much fun, and it was wonderful and very close, and we both had an older brother. We, both, lived fairly modest lives. I remember also I think it was fifth grade, we had to sing the Star Spangled Banner, which is very hard to sing if you really think about it, and know the words and everything, and you could do it alone or with a friend. So Joan and I, of course, chose to do it together, and it was pretty atonal, actually, but we survived it. My cat had 3 kittens, and I kept 2, and she took one and named her Effie. And so Effie, I think, may have been her first cat. And then my 2 each had 5 kittens. So we played with kittens and kittens and kittens. But they had a little white dog named Poochie. And I remember her father, Poochie, the way he would say it. And also Joan, as you know her, had a very unique, wonderful way of speaking. And I mean, her voice is in my head, it just is. And I used to like to annoy her to hear her say that. I mean, and I was a very good little girl I didn't cause trouble, but that was one of the few things that I remember really, really doing. In middle and high school, I mean, all of us, went on to the same middle high school, Willis, and then it became, we were the first class to graduate from Hayes High School. And, once we got into high school, I became neurotically obsessed with playing the viola, and so I was traveling to Columbus for lessons and then to Cincinnati for lessons and practicing all the time. Joan was playing flute in the marching band and being much more involved, I think, in the school activities, so that we kind of weren't as close in a way. We knew each other well and so forth, but it was not as close as we were in elementary school. And she worked in the style shop. I remember visiting her there. And one thing that's important to me is as I've aged, well, we've reconnected. She and Richard came and visited me in Raleigh. I conned her into going to the last 2 high school reunions, where she really didn't want to go. Got there and totally enjoyed it. And which people don't always realize is you may not particularly want to go back, but people there want to see you, and that was very meaningful to me. And I frequently at night dream, unintentionally, about home in Delaware, about the 2 houses I lived, and always has to do with house. And frequently I'm coming back, I'm trying to find my mother, or I'm trying to pack up her house to move her to Raleigh, or I'm searching for her, and I always want to find Joan in the dream. And I'm thinking, where is she? Where is she? I need to get her so we can have lunch or dinner or something together. I need to find Joan. And so I see her in my dreams, and randomly over my life, which is a long time now, she's always been a presence, and a very spiritual, kind of ever-present person. And I think we just need to live and enjoy the things that she would enjoy and live for her. So she's a treasure, right? But if we were little girls together, and you don't replace that. It's what it is. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ilse, for sharing those really touching stories. It was a great insight. Now I'd like to ask Mr. Richard Holliday, a friend of Richard's since 8th grade, to come forward and share some remembrances.
Mr. Hughes, would you please join me? Yeah. We were scheduled to assist one of our fellow classmates, Glenn Gill, up here, but unfortunately, due to COVID and the weather, and they live out of state, he wasn't able to be here. And he and his wife Sharon send their regards. Well, I was supposed to start with a joke, right? Well, okay. So it reminds me of standing here at the podium, reminds me of watching the news and watching the press briefing, except I'm going to tell you some truths. I had to make this so I could see it. I could recall 3 incidents with Joan and Richard that came to mind when we're thinking about this event. The first one is Santa Claus comes to town. I remember in the late 70s when Santa came to town trying to entice this young, beautiful lady onto his lap, but she wouldn't go, mostly because on the other side of Santa was this hulking beast that probably would have slapped him and pulled his beard off had he really succeeded. But that was my first remembrance. The second one I entitled Cat's Ears. While visiting with Joan, waiting for probably someone not to be mentioned up here to arrive at Rich's house for our poker game, I remarked how I would like to have a coin purse made out of cat ears because they're so soft. Joan's eyes went wide open and said, "Not my cats." And that was when I first realized how she was into cats and didn't want any part of that action. We both just laughed. But years later, I still don't have my coin purse made out of cat ears. However, I do have my male kangaroo pouch bag for coins. So think about that for a moment. The last thing I'd like to mention was called the dinner visit. Early on in our lives, we would, on occasion, meet with Richard and Joan for dinner. She was all, and it's like Richard called me to get these things put into the original part of this. She was always witty and wait for just the right moment to inject a funny but thought-out comment. On this one occasion, we went to their house before deciding to go to dinner. In the middle of our conversation, our 3-year-old son decides to projectile vomit on their white couch and carpet. Joan's eyes, as you've seen up here, big as silver dollars. Didn't say a thing, got up, raced for the towels. Needless to say, my wife and I were so embarrassed. Richie, of course, wasn't, because, that's what kids do. But Joan took it in stride. And she put us all at ease. We all cleaned up. Richard let me wear his jeans. And we went to dinner. And we never spoke of that until today. I'm closing with my prepared remarks, and thankful that I had the opportunity. Help me out here. To meet with Joan and Richard in the final moments. And I'm thankful for that. Thank you.
I don't know how to follow up the vomit story. As Richard said, I've known him since 8th grade at Clinton Junior High School, more than 55 years. And so I've known Joan ever since Richard knew Joan. But I moved out of the Columbus area in 1978, moved to Newark, Ohio. Richard helped me move my furniture, and then to Cincinnati, and then back to Newark, where I lived currently. And so I didn't have an opportunity to socialize with Richard and Joan as a couple very much. But I did get to know Joan very well through Richard. I can attest to the very positive effect that she had on Richard, how she helped to shape his personality, which at times needed shaping, and how she helped him become the man that he is today. I also know Joan through his stories and his comments that he would make when he and I were hanging out. So I would like to commemorate Joan for the very positive effect that she had on Richard's life, the very loving and long relationship she had with him, and I count him as my dear friend. Thank you.
Glenn's comments will be posted on the condolence page of this Schedinger's website, so you could read them there. Thank you.
Thanks, Bill and Kent. Really appreciate your sharing. Now I'd like to ask Miss Cynthia Lambeth, Miss Jeannie Hadley, and Miss Pam Harris to come forward and share your thoughts about Joan. They are all longtime friends and former members of Richard's human resource team at Sterling Commerce.
Hello. Like several of you in the room today, I've known Richard for a long time. To be more precise, I've known him since I was 24 years old. So I guess it would be more accurate to say a long, long time. Over the years, he was my boss, my mentor, and most importantly, my dear friend. I am honored today to say a few words as we remember Joan, the love of my dear friend's life. While my heart is heavy with grief for his loss, I am full of gratitude for the remarkable woman Joan was. Many of you may not have met Joan, but you surely knew of her. One of the first things you learn about Richard when you meet him is that he is married to Joan, and she is the love of his life. To say their love was deep and enduring does not begin to do their marriage the justice it deserves. Joan was a very kind woman. In a world that often celebrates the extroverted, she showed us the profound beauty of the quiet, the thoughtful, and the understated. In her, Richard found a partner who anchored him and was a calming force that complemented his outgoing personality. Personally, I would like to express my sincere appreciation for Joan, acknowledging that she was full of grace and had an understanding that transcended the ordinary. Joan possessed a generosity of spirit and trust that she extended to all of Richard's many friends, which in turn allowed him to extend trust to us. In a world where this level of trust can be rare, this unique and special quality made Joan and Richard's life richer and more fulfilling in their nearly 5 decades together. Joan not only loved Richard deeply, but also understood the significance of meaningful connections beyond their marital bond. Richard independently cultivated diverse, deep, and meaningful friendships with both men and women all over the world. Joan's ability to recognize and embrace the importance of these friendships, regardless of gender, created a space where everyone felt valued and welcomed. This speaks volumes about Joan's confidence, security, and the strength of her marriage, and I know it filled Richard's heart. I know for me, my own life has been greatly enriched because of the trust between them and the strength of the nearly 50-year bond. For that, I'm truly grateful. Joan was also a very gracious host, especially when Richard's team of mostly women and our partners and spouses would gather. Some of my most vivid memories of Joan are around the holidays. For years, Joan and Richard's home was the setting of the Sterling Commerce Human Resources White Elephant Holiday Party. The way we played was that each person brought a used and unwanted, beautifully wrapped item from home, and then we each selected a gift in the order of numbers drawn. Each person could select an unopened gift or steal an opened gift from someone else. By the way, every person secretly and not so secretly hoped they would be taking home something much smaller than they brought. Often the most coveted gift was not the most expensive, lavish, or useful gift, but one that could be mostly easily disposed of or discreetly left behind without the host knowing. Upon arrival to these holiday parties, Richard would try to assign us all chores for the evening, even though we told him he was not the boss of us that night. Joan, being the more attentive one, would focus on making us feel welcome and comfortable and feeding us sweets. I know what you're thinking. HR people can't be that much fun. But I'll tell you, even though those parties, after 30 plus years, they elicit very fond memories for me, and I know for my coworkers as well, many of whom are here today. I recall one year in particular, someone brought a hideous, large, unwanted lamp that had a brass base with fake lemons going up the side of it. It had a horrible lampshade that had clearly seen better days. I don't know if anyone ever really admitted to bringing that ugly monstrosity of a lamp, but it never really mattered, since eventually the entire HR department claimed it as our own. It naturally became tradition for the person who sadly ended up with it to bring it back the next year and try to entice, aka trick, someone into picking it by disguising it in any number of ways, such as an odd-shaped or bigger box or in a beautifully wrapped package. That crazy thing got passed around for years, with the lucky new owner reluctantly taking it home and dragging it back the next year. At some point, someone recognized it in an Architectural Digest magazine, and the joke was on all of us. I don't remember who ultimately ended up with that ugly lemon lamp, but I do remember the laughs and camaraderie that endured around it and the evening. We still laugh about it when we get together as a group, and yes, we do still sometimes get together. Richard built a wonderful team. Joan and Richard were always good sports when other unwanted gifts would be stashed under sofas and in closets of their homes. No doubt the recipient having decided it would be more fun to have them find it later than to take it home and dispose of it themselves. These fond memories of laughter, shared in the warmth of friendships, forged in the Needles' living room, could not have happened if not for sweet Joan. So Richard, my dear, dear friend, today, I and those who know you offer our condolences. I hope you can remember Joan not with sadness or sorrow, but with gratitude for the moments you shared, for the love that enriched your lives, and for her quiet spirit that will continue to inspire and guide you. Beyond today, I hope you continue to celebrate your profound love and life of trust that stood as an unshakable foundation for your beautiful time together. And for us, the friends and family of both Joan and Richard, as we say our goodbyes, let's carry forward the lessons Joan leaves behind, the power of love and trust in forging unbreakable bonds and friendships, and the resilience it provides even in the face of life's inevitable and unimaginable challenges. I hope we all can honor Joan's legacy, which is not just a testament to enduring love, but a reminder that trust is the cornerstone upon which the meaningful and lasting relationships are built. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Jeannie. Can I just say ditto and be done? No, can't get away with that. I've known Richard since 1995 when he hired me as his senior secretary at Sterling. And if any of you have known Richard for that length of time, that means you've known Joan. When Richard first called me and told me of Joan's passing, along with incredible grief and sadness and shock, one of my first thoughts was I remembered a picture that Richard kept in his office of him and Joan. And I walked into his office frequently, and every time I did, no matter where his office was, every time I walked into his office, I'd glance at that picture, and I'd know exactly who I was looking at. I was looking at true, lifelong soulmates. Richard was my boss, then Richard was my boss and my mentor, then he was my mentor and my friend. And he helped me to see my full potential. But I'm not the only one he did that for, and that's clear. Richard has a gift for coaching and mentoring, and he has shared that gift with countless women and men around the world, I dare say. But the thing is, Joan was always there to support him, to inspire him, and to encourage him. Joan made it easy for Richard to go out into the world and share his gifts and talents with us. She was always there. She was always in all the stories that he told. I've heard many stories about their travels, about her artistic talents, about her sense of humor, which you've seen in some of these pictures, and about her incredible friendships that she had, particularly with Punky and with her late dear friend, Bill. So no matter where he went, who he was with, what he was doing, he carried Joan with him. She was an integral part of who he is, and she was his everything. And whether Richard went out into a stormy world or a calm one, Joan was his center. She was his beacon. She was his lighthouse. For several years now, Richard and I have had our annual date, our annual Richard Jeannie date. And I have to be grateful to Joan for giving her blessing, because without Joan saying that's okay, it wouldn't have happened. And I would not have been blessed with the many hours that I've had the chance to spend with Richard. So I know I'm not the only one who's grateful for the relationship that they shared and how it benefited all of us in this room and a whole lot of people who are not here today. I particularly want to thank Joan because what she allowed Richard to do enriched my life greatly. And I still see the benefits today. So thank you, Joan. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Cynthia Lambeth, and most of you that know me from Sterling, they put me last because they know I would probably take too much time, so you can time me. Mark, my husband over there, and I got to really know Richard and Joan after I left Sterling in 2001, and they came to visit us over the years during our many moves, and we stayed at their home, and Joan and I had a little bit of one-on-one time, so some of the comments will be the same as some of the others, but when Richard asked me to do this, there are 3 words that describe Joan. One is very thoughtful, and whenever she would come to visit, she always brought something. Richard brought the booze, and she brought me a little gift. We always felt comfortable with her. She just, if you were in her presence, you just felt comfortable. And then she was creative. And some of the creativity I never knew until later years. I have some of her rocks that she gave me on their last visit. And dare I say, she was also colorful. So I have a little cute story about a Cynthia and Joan time. About 7-ish years ago, we were living in Fort Wayne, Indiana at the time, and Richard and Joan invited us for a weekend. We said, okay, we'll come over. The boys had tickets to an Ohio State football game, and the girls thought, well, we'll just hang out and do something. So Joan says to me, I got an idea. Let's go to lunch. Now, mind you, I haven't lived here in a while, and a lot changes in Columbus. I said, okay. So we get in her car, and she's all proud that she's going to use her navigation system on the car. Okay, cool. So she said, I've been to this restaurant once. I'm going to put it in, and, we're going to go. I said, okay. So we're driving, and I'm going to try to do some of Joan's facial expressions. I won't do them justice, but she's like, Cynthia, it's taken a little longer than I thought. I don't know, I said, okay, She goes, it's a little unfamiliar, but, the navigation is taking us. We pull into this parking lot, and it's about 20 minutes of 12 on a Saturday. Okay, maybe places aren't real crowded for lunch, right? Right. So I said, okay, Joan. She goes, there's one car here. I said, yeah, no kidding. And it looked a little like a dive. Worse than a dive. Okay, so I'm like, well, maybe they have good food, right? Right. So anyway, we're sitting there, and she goes, do you think we should go in and ask? I said, well, there's only one car here. Let's wait a few minutes. So no sooner does she say that, and I look out of the corner of my eye, and there's this small pole with a sign up on top. I said, Joan, there's no way we're going inside. Why not? I said, look at the sign. Folks, this, I'll say nicely, was a gentleman's club. No, it was a strip club. I said, Joan, where are we? She said, I don't know. And then immediately some colorful language comes out. Now, Joan mostly would say those things under her breath. Well, I burst out laughing. She burst out laughing. And then she said to me, we're going to Polaris Mall. And I said, do you know how to get there? Do I know how to get there? You could blindfold me and my car. So we take the back roads, we get there, and we're at a sports bar and catching part of the game. And then she said, now, Cynthia, don't say a word to Richard. I said, are you kidding? Our secret is ours, you know. What happened in your car stays in our car. So we get home and the boys say, so how was your day? Well, fine. And guess who tells? Not moi, Joan tells. And so then we had, you know, a little great laugh at her expense. I have other stories, but that's probably the best one for this crowd. Anyway, that is one of my fun memories, and so I'll leave you on a high note of how wonderful Joan has been to many of us, whether directly or indirectly. So thank you. Excuse me.
Thanks for that wonderful sharing. That was great. That was just great. Now I'd like to ask Miss Rhonda Comer, who is Richard's cousin, to come up and share a little bit. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Rhonda. I'm Richard's cousin. I met Joan when I was a teenager, when Richard introduced her to our family when we lived in Virginia, and they came for a visit. They were both young and adorable and newly in love. Joan was so quiet and sweet, and Richard was so proud and happy. When we moved back to Ohio, we got to know Joan more, and we were happy to celebrate Richard and Joan at their wedding reception. I'm thankful for all the great memories that I will always have of Joan. She was so gracious and happy. I loved her big smile and her laugh. She was truly a joy to be around. We all had a lot of great times together, from going on vacation to Fort Myers, Florida, to just hanging out at Mama and Papa's front porch, to getting a famous veal and bubble in Jackson. Joan was the best hostess to all the cookouts and Thanksgivings at their house. She was a great cook and always had everyone's favorite things. She was so kind and thoughtful, and we all shared a lot of great meals and great times together. I will miss our conversations and her fun observations. I admired her greatly, her calm spirit and her keen sense of humor, her zest for life, with all of her and Richard's grand adventures, big and small. They truly are forever soulmates. Their love will always be. I'm so very thankful and feel so blessed to have had a place in her life. I will always have so many wonderful memories that make me smile when I think of her. I will always miss her, but I will remember her when I carry one of her purses that remind me of her, elegant and colorful. I also have one of her beautiful rocks that she created on my bookshelf at home in my living room. I couldn't have asked for more better mementos of Joan. Thank you, Richard. And as always, love and hugs.
Thank you, Rhonda, for those wonderful, heartfelt insights. At this time, we'd like to invite anyone else who might be so moved to share a memory about Joan. We have the mic that we've been told we've got to use so that the telecast will pick it up. But is there anyone else who would like to take a few moments and share some thoughts? All right. Now I'd like to ask Richard, my dearest friend and Joan's husband and soulmate, to come forward and share with us.
So I have joked with several people already as we were giving each other hugs in the hallway. I'm going to get in workshop mode. It's the only way I'm going to get through this. I still may not get through it, but I've planted some people to holler at me, and Richard, you can do this. And I'm the person who has to do it. Joan's story is our story. Most of you know how I asked her to be my Valentine. I've told that story at least. How many people heard that story? Thank you. I want to talk about the things you may not know. I've clearly lost the woman who knows my life story deeply. Small example. In our first trip to meet my Jackson County, Southern Ohio family, Joan met my great-grandmother, who was born in 1887. Think about that. She knows me, my story. We were partners in our lives. Before I continue with my prepared remarks, I want to call out two men who are seated in the front row. I'm not going to call out my whole family, but two men. My Uncle Floyd, my Uncle Larry. I put this on social media, LinkedIn, Facebook, all that stuff a couple years ago, that when Joan and I celebrated a wedding anniversary, these two men, Uncle Floyd with my Aunt Sydney, Uncle Larry with my Aunt Judy, over 60 years each, they didn't tell me how to treat a woman. They showed me. Thank you. Joan lived the great 20th century American life. She saw the world change in many ways. She was born at the tail end of World War II. She was in college in the 1960s at the height of the women's rights movement, civil rights movement. A very small example of something that's, I think, interesting. We have Joan's flute from the Delaware High School marching band up here, and we were at her family dinner, the Schuster family Christmas Eve dinner, and her grandniece learned that Joan played the flute in the Delaware High School band. And the grandniece said, "Aunt Joan, when you went to Ohio State, did you play in the Ohio State marching band?" And Joan said, "Well, they didn't really look for flute players. I, probably may not have made the cut. And when I went to college at Ohio State, women were not allowed in the marching band." Think about that. In addition to music, Joan had other artistic pursuits in childhood, ballet and dancing. Ilsa's staying at my house this weekend. Been giving me a lot of hugs, thank you. They're childhood dancers at Ohio Wesleyan Theater productions. Obviously, the arts were important to Joan. She kept this love and appreciation for the arts and her childhood delights her entire lifetime. I wrote in her obituary the first time she saw a palm tree with childlike wonder. She kept this captivation with many things. We saw more theater productions than I can count. We never had kids. We took 6 trips to Disney World. Oh, they've opened another theme park. And I would say to myself, I guess we're going to Disney World. Joan wanted to see Siegfried and Roy's magic act at the Mirage in Las Vegas. Naturally, I got front row seats where I paid more attention to the joy on her face than I did to what was on stage. One of Joan's challenges, as Cynthia mentioned, was clearly her sense of direction. As a young social worker, Joan had to make home visits across the county. And this is way back in the 60s and 70s, and social workers had to visit to verify that people lived there, how many bedrooms they had, where they get the right money, and it was their name on the mailbox, and the number of people in the residence, and so forth. But Joan was from Delaware. Navigating the big city of Columbus was... So when Joan and I first started dating, and I learned she made these home visits, she would sit in her apartment the night before and map how to get from this place to this place in the city of Columbus. Only Joan didn't go from this place to this place. She drove to Broaden High in the middle of the city, drove to this place, drove back to Broaden High to get to this place. And I said, you know, you could just go this way. And she said, no, that's not how I do it. Our first big trip was to Chicago. We stayed at the downtown Holiday Inn. We had 2 rooms, may have been adjoining, but you know, her dad used to be the police captain in Delaware. So in case he called, there was a room in my name and a room in her name. So I'll just let you go from there. So we drove around Chicago. We had wonderful days in Chicago. And every evening, I would drive back to the downtown Holiday Inn. We would turn the corner, and she would look at me and say, did you know that was going to be there? Her victory came at age 59. This is in 2004, and I was working with a small consulting company, and one of my colleagues could not do a workshop. He got sick and could not do a workshop and said, Richard, I need you to do this workshop for me. Well, problem was that Joan and I had plans that weekend to leave that Friday and go to Disney World. And I said to Joan, I need to stay and teach this. Would you like to fly down Friday morning and keep our original flight? I'll get there about midnight, and you can have a day at Disney World. And at age 59, Joan's going, I should be able to do that. So she got to the airport, got to Orlando. Noon comes during the workshop. I get my cell phone out. I call her cell phone, and she said, guess where I am? I'm at the Rainforest Cafe drinking a gin and tonic. She had made it through the airport, onto the shuttle, onto the Orleans resort, and gotten the ferry boat to the Rainforest Cafe. Her path from shyness to comfort was also interesting for me to watch, just how she became more comfortable. Many people may not realize, but somewhere up here, I think I put them out, maybe over there, Joan overcame her early shyness in her 20s with something astonishing. At her gravesite, her nephew talked about this, that he was 10 years old, and his parents told him he could stay home from school because Aunt Joan was going to be on television. And in her 20s, Joan signed up for belly dancing classes from the famed Habiba. And Habiba was looking for people to appear on a morning talk show here in Columbus to demonstrate belly dancing. Joan was on TV doing belly dancing. I then started telling people that over the years I learned Joan could do interesting things with finger symbols. We'll stop there. She got comfortable with her silliness, the panda bear. My Facebook friends know the story of the panda bear, but those who don't, when we would go to a carnival, I would say, I'm going to spend $100 and win you that big stuffed animal. And she said, I don't know what I would do with it. Don't waste your money. I don't want that. So 5 years ago, I walked into Kroger's, and they had a big box of stuffed animals. $25. So it was in the trunk of my car for several days before Christmas. Christmas morning, we had our gathering around the fireplace and opened our gifts. And I said, if there's one more thing you should look at, walk into the laundry room. And she opened the laundry room door and was going, what did you do? I could tell immediately she's going to, where am I going to put that? What am I going to do with that? So the pictures show you. She made a game of it. I come home and it's sitting on my toilet. I come home and it's hanging from the rafters in the loft. I come home and it's got, crime scene tape around it. And she said, "We had an accident." Next day I come home, she's got it laying on a blanket with battery cables hooked to its chest and cotton balls, and I had to do emergency surgery. She got comfortable with silliness. The big yellow duck. I get my big fancy promotion to vice president, and I get home that evening, and Joan says, "I got something for you to put in your office." I said, "I can't have a big yellow duck. I'm an executive." And she said, "I want you to remember, you're not that important." So visiting executives from Europe and around the world would come into the vice president of the human resources office, and there's a big yellow duck. She got more comfortable with family and friends. She talked a little bit more, but she kept those keen insights, that quietness. Now, I'm going to go out on a limb and tell you another story, and I'm just going to tell it. When I asked Joan to be my Valentine in 1974, and she agreed and we started dating, I quickly found out that having a relationship with Joan, being in Joan's life and having her in my life, was a package deal. Early in her career as a social worker, Joan was assigned to a unit where her desk mate was a big, gruff, 6'2" looking black guy named Bill Culver. And I learned very quickly they were best friends. And if I was going to be with Joan, Bill was part of the deal. It became pretty easy because they had decided that they weren't romantically interested in each other, and they had never had a platonic friend of the opposite sex, so they were just going to be friends. Over time, my family sitting here in the front row will verify, Bill became my brother. We played poker together. We would go see the Quentin Tarantino movies that Joan didn't want to see. Bill was a wonderful baker. My mom started calling Bill her good son. I was the best man at Bill's wedding. What I also came to understand was that one of the early foundations of their friendship was their mutual fondness for weed. I didn't share it. I tried it a couple times in college, got a headache and a sore throat. But, As the years progressed, weed slowly became replaced with wine, a glass of wine. But they just liked hanging out and acting silly. So, here's where it gets a little hard. Bill died 3 years ago on December 19th. Joan died on December 19th. So, in the final moments at Riverside, when it became apparent that I might lose her, I don't know what happens when you die, but I started whispering to Bill, "Take care of her until I get there." I just know they're sitting somewhere in a corner, smoking a joint, making fun of me trying to get through the speech. I fell in love with Joan's big eyes and big smile. I became more deeply in love with her because she allowed me to be me. Unconditional trust. She knew I would always come home to her. I wanted to make her proud, tell her my stories, and tell the world how special she was to me. I will miss our kiss hello, kiss goodbye, kiss goodnight. We kissed every day we were together. I'll miss her cackle when she was watching America's Funniest Videos. I hate that show. I would go in and watch my World Series of Poker in the bedroom. I could hear her laughing through the whole house. I'll miss our road trips and our big adventures. I'll also miss the small moments. Every Saturday, we went to breakfast at First Watch, and I got to sit across the table and look at this woman. One of the moments I never felt closer to her, we took some great trips, and we were on a ferry boat from Seattle to Vancouver Island. We were going over to Victoria and see Bouchard Gardens, and we stay at the Empress Hotel for 3 nights. And the ferry ride is kind of long. So Joan had taken a book of crossword puzzles, and we sat on the ferry boat, hour and a half, didn't say a word. She would put a word in the crossword, hand it to me. I would do a word, hand it back. She would do a word. I never felt closer to her. It's those quiet moments. Then we found her new artistic talent with rock painting. Not everybody knows how she got started on this, but several years ago, we would take walks to the neighborhood, and Joan admired these painted rocks in a neighbor house 3 blocks away. And a few weeks later, the neighbor put up a sign and said, "I'm so mad somebody stole my rocks." So Joan went to the craft store, bought rocks, bought paint, and started painting rocks. She got better and better and better. A few weeks into this, she had some pretty good-looking rocks. So Joan took a walk by herself one day. The lady's car was not in the driveway. She left these rocks on her porch. To this day, that woman doesn't know who left her those rocks. Joan wanted her to have those rocks. I just loved how we worked great as a couple and how we recognized we were 2 different people. We had different needs, and she made sure that I got my needs met. I made sure she got her needs met. I've talked about this during COVID. We started taking our neighborhood walks, and I decided to stay home and not go to my office, and we would start taking walks together on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. On Tuesday and Thursday, we took separate walks. We knew we worked great as a couple, and we had different needs. Most of all, I'll miss how I felt when she looked at me. Very few women look at men the way she looked at me. In the final days in the hospital, she was in a lot of pain. I tried to distract her with some breathing exercises, and I kind of grew fond of those questions that James Lipton used to ask in the Actor Studio program. He would interview guests at the end, and he would say a few questions. So she was in pain until she could get that next pain medication. Trying to distract her, I said, "Joan, what sound or noise do you hate?" And she said, "Car tires screeching." "Joan, what sound or noise do you love?" And she said, "You giggling." It made her happy when I was giggling. She was happy when I was happy, and she was happy when other people were happy. So, I want you to do something for me. I want you to turn to someone in this room. I'm not going to ask you to shake hands or grab hands. You can if you want. I want you to look eye to eye to someone in this room right now. Now, I want you to just look at that person and smile. That silly, warm feeling in your heart right now, that's Joan. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard, for the courage to share those beautiful insights about the love of your life. I know that Richard and Joan did not belong to a formal church. Richard's not religious, but he did share that Joan told him that she prayed sometimes. So with her approval, I'd like to offer a short poem followed by a very brief prayer. You're more than welcome to bow your heads if you would like. The name of the poem is Life well lived. A life well lived is a precious gift of hope and strength and grace. For someone who has made our world a brighter, better place. It is filled with moments, sweet and sad, with smiles and sometimes tears, with friendships formed and good times shared, and laughter through the years. A life well lived is a legacy of joy and pride and pleasure. A living, lasting memory our grateful hearts will always treasure. Thank you, Joan Evelyn Needles, for your very wonderful life well lived. And now, Joan, we say goodbye. Earth to earth, ashes to ashes. And dust to dust. May you rest in peace. Amen. On behalf of Richard and his family, thank you so very much for attending today's celebration. If you'd like a private word with Richard or another family member, they'll be here at the front of the room after. Thank you.